We don't get to see much politically conscious music in 2025. Outside of Irish hip-hop group Kneecap, the music industry has seemingly kneecapped artists from being artivists. An artivist is, of course, an artist that is vocal about issues and brings issues to a forefront, something that many pivotal artists of the past cite as crucial to being an artist. Tupac Shakur was the essence of an artivist. He was the essence of an artist. Not just because he was talented, or loud, or poetic, or tragic, but because he was basically the last direct lineage of the Black Panther movement in mainstream culture. And that's real, because that was an authentic movement of human rights, labor rights, and community. Not something that could be profited from, or where that could even be considered, but legitimate resistance aimed at helping families in the community. The Black Panther movement wasn't selling rebellion as an aesthetic. The Black Panther movement was fighting for real liberation, with the understanding that real liberation is not achieved through capitalism. And Tupac was authentic in his voice, because it was inherited from a community that knew what was at stake. Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, was a Black Panther, who defended herself in court while pregnant with him. Afeni was an intellectual mind who understood both the surveillance state and state power up close. Tupac's stepfather, Mutulu, and Afeni were surveilled by the US government for their activism. You can read more about Tupac's political roots in Dean Van Wynn's book, Words from My Comrades. Tupac's people were movement people, organizers, exiles, survivors. Tupac grew up with the vocabulary of food programs and political education, mutual aid, and constant surveillance. So when he got a platform, he knew what he had to do. He lived it. The Black Panther Party was dismantled in 1982. Leaders were imprisoned or assassinated, as they'd call it on TikTok. The movement was smeared as criminal and policed into silence. From Fred Hampton to Mark Clark to Bobby Hutton to Assata Shakur fleeing to Cuba. Assata was a highly influential figure in the movement, as well as the step-aunt and godmother of Tupac. Ronald Reagan's era of telling everyone to pull up bootstraps while cutting off their laces would begin. And then conveniently the crack epidemic, as well as AIDS, would devastate the Black community for a decade to come. Now, I wouldn't theorize that the US government would directly facilitate this, but you can't really put anything past the US government, especially at this point in history, with everything they did to the Black Panther movement. I will say, the US government activating COINTELPRO. No, that's not cryptocurrency brain rot. An initiative to dismantle radical resistance. At the very least, left communities vulnerable to epidemics. The Black Panther Party established community schooling, where children could eat and learn for free. Where children learned about math, health, self-defense, community, history, reading, and English. The government infiltrated these communities, leaving them without these crucial extra resources, made these communities less safe. Fast forward to today, corporations gained unlimited power, and as of 1982, there has been no widespread left movement in the United States with this level of influence since the Black Panther movement. But there was a new hope. Tupacalypse Now hit the scene in 1991 after Shock G and Tupac made waves with Digital Underground. And America, of course, said, no thanks. Literally on his first album, Tupac is already beefing with the Vice President of the United States. Well, if that doesn't scream my favorite artist. Moral panic about hip-hop then explodes. The media learns a new trick, treat black art like a crime scene via manufacturing consent. Sound of some sirens over a beat, and you'd have anchors and politicians nationwide in the fetal position for days. Dan Quayle essentially started what feels like the first ever culture war topic with Tupac, where a cop was unalived by someone and his defense attorney claimed that he was inspired by Tupac's track, Soulja's Story. Ah yes, project the problem of police violence onto black art, the black community, and tracks like Soulja's Story, or Trapped. Trapped literally starts with these lyrics, which quite clearly epitomize how the album discusses the government's fault in violence. You know, they got me trapped in this prison of seclusion. Happiness, living on the streets, is a delusion. Even a smooth criminal one day must get caught, shot up or shot down with the bullet that he bought. 9mm kicking, thinking about what the streets do to me. because they never taught peace in the black community. It's amazing how many of his lyrics line up with not only his background, but American history as well. Not only has the government not done enough to teach or practice peace in the black community, but this goes for all communities. It is an imperialist, violent state, but also dismantled the Black Panther Party, which was teaching these very things. And how about the song that made this guy trigger happy? Soldier's Story. They cutting off welfare. They think crime is rising now. You got whites killing, cops killing, shit just gonna get worse. They're just gonna become soldiers. The song is literally about how the US government has caused violence in every community. Dan Quayle here. No. I see what you did there. It's not like our dynamic derived from slavery and slave patrols and redlining and segregation. This is on you, Tupac Shakur. I don't know how, when we have all the power, but it is. This kind of projection against resistance movements is very much a historical fascist tactic. But there's also a very modern example with how Israel blames Hamas for every little thing when Israel, the state with all the power, has occupied Gaza for over 50 years. So even if there aren't any direct links between Dan Quayle and COINTELPRO, it is obvious what imperialism seeks to do when it comes to resistance. And it's no coincidence that Tupac was already facing censorship on his first album, given his Black Panther roots. And after a few albums, Tupac would make an effort to bring about a movement for the black community called Thug Life, with the album Thug Life Volume 1 in 1994. Thug Life stood for The Hate You Give Little Infants Fucks Everybody, another reference to how imperialism treats marginalized communities and everyone. The United States destroying the Black Panther movement, which focused so much of its efforts on helping black youth in America. Or look at the genocidal imperialism that Israel and the place that's funding it, the United States, is doing to an on average 28 children per day in Palestine. Did you know that roughly half of the Palestinian population is children? Or if we want to go even further, how about the Jeffrey Epstein links to a vast amount of prominent political United States figures? Or how Israel has an open arm policy for PDF files seeking refuge. Doesn't all this prove how little imperialism cares about the future of society? Not at all a coincidence that children are a target of imperialism. Imperialism seeks to use the future to accomplish their goals. And if their goal is white supremacy, which it is, then what will an empire do?
Something's not right.
They will continue to suppress voices from marginalized communities. They will try to prevent white women from getting abortions so that they can maintain a white majority through birthing. They will make life harder on marginalized communities by making these communities have babies with a lack of resources. And they may not even require crucial vaccines for children, though basic science also just happens to be kryptonite for supremacists, because it's ideology that is obviously both immoral and stupid. And we should instead be societies built around community and programs for children. But instead we have a society built around profit, corporate power, and electing politicians implementing white supremacist policy, like deporting thousands of nonviolent working contributors to society, ICE raids, or militarizing cities because of criminals despite crime being down. But once again, this National Guard and DC thing is just to keep a society in check, to keep communities in check and surveilled, similar to COINTELPRO and the Black Panther movement.
Some old Tupac, sir.
All eyes on me. Hey, this shit is banging.
So community is everything to progress, and of course children are the future. The future is everything to progress, and imperialist white supremacy is inherently regressive. So it most certainly is hate to little infants, as the Thug Life acronym puts it. And that hate you give to little infants does everybody. When you do not prioritize progress as a society, you are leaving every community to fend for itself without resources. The Thug Life acronym on the surface level may not seem like it has this kind of depth, but it does because it was a concept so ingrained in Tupac's being and upbringing that he would go about it in a way that felt hip-hop and it could relate to communities culturally. And this kind of natural worldview just hasn't been found in music since Pac's death. Because of how the United States operates as an empire, it stomps out resistance. It uses propaganda to label resistance movements as terrorists, and uses propaganda and social conditioning to ensure that as few people as possible are wired to seeing how the world could be a much more just place. And when you do that, plus ensure that the music industry, and every industry, is just a leg of global imperialism, you continue that line of thinking into music where the primary topics become money and vanity. To the point where Tupac found himself even making a lot of music about those things. Fast forward to today, and there's an apathy in music that wasn't quite there in previous generations. There was more of an understanding that everything is political. You might not do politics, but politics is going to do you regardless. And today's apathy from artists was encapsulated by Chappell Roan this year, where she basically said, I don't have enough time to be politically informed. Chappell Roan actually has been vocal about some issues, but her quote epitomizes that apathy in music, because it's a part of an artist's job to discuss these things. Art is a projection of our reality. It's to speak about reality and make people feel something. Nina Simone, Gil Scott-Heron, John Lennon, Bob Dylan, Fela Kuti, Rage Against the Machine, Marvin Gaye, or Frank Zappa. Politics were so normalized in music because music is art. And politics is everything, especially in art, which is probably the most common thing human beings connect to each other on. But corporate America has successfully turned the music industry into a faux apolitical right-wing echo chamber that only platform mainstream artists that accrue millions of fans, similar to previous generations. But unlike those artists, do not use their platform for any good or to speak out against atrocities. And I'll never do leftist purity testing, but Tupac was a member of the Communist Party of Maryland. Dude was about that life. And things get so much worse when you actually think about how few artists are actually self-avowed leftists. It's pretty much just Boots Riley, Rage Against the Machine, and me in the corner with no fans. You know it's bad when the Dave Matthews Band is one of the few acts left in music to be vocal about issues. And they haven't had a hit in like over 2 decades. Dave Matthews Band is low-key guilty pleasure music for me, and I definitely feel guilty admitting that. The hottest take I have in this video is that if you don't like at least one Dave Matthews Band song, then you're just being edgy. Don't judge me. Anyways, Pac was special. I've listened to every Pac song. I'm a bit of a Pac stan. So I'm going to do a top 5 of my favorite Tupac songs, because I also want to acknowledge how good his music was. Number 5, Pain, from the Above the Rim soundtrack. The beat's just killer. It's gritty, it's about survival and strife, and I've always loved Above the Rim. Number 4, Lord Knows, from Me Against the World. Survival, oppression, a lack of material conditions, and the stress that weighs on your brain in between. One of my all-time favorite songs, and one I'll always relate to. Number 3, Everything They Owe. I know it's posthumous, but there was a lot of phenomenal posthumous music released for Pac. He, in fact, quite easily has the most impressive posthumous catalog in music history. Technically, I like this song, but I probably wouldn't have it in my top 5, but I do because it's a song that really summarizes like every theme that we've just talked about. Number 2, Death Around the Corner. I don't care if you find me some horrorcore, death metal, New York hardcore, you are not going to find a track harder than this one. This is actually one of the few songs that I can recite every lyric to, but there are a few Pac tracks like that for me, especially on Me Against the World, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. Death Around the Corner also has one of the most impressive flows I've ever heard on a hip-hop track. Number 1, All About You. One of my favorite things in music ever is the West Coast G-Funk synth sign. I've just always vibed with it, and this is a track that I vibe with heavily. And I think I resonate with what the song is about. To me, this song is an allegory to how someone you've loved impacts you. One of the ways I view the world is how we impact and influence one another. And when I put pen to paper and make music, or a YouTube video, or whatever it is, I often find myself thinking about someone that's special to me. But plot twist, number 1 is actually a 4-way tie, which also includes White Man's World, Life of an Outlaw, and Hold Your Head, because those 3 songs are some of the greatest songs ever made, in my opinion. So those are my top 5 Pac tracks, and feel free to let me know what Tupac tracks are your favorites in the comments. But with all this being said, I think it's important to say no one is perfect, and we should never worship celebrity. but we can and should ask more of them, and we should ask the bare minimum for them to understand that being an artist means also being an activist.
She maybe didn't plan it, but took time to understand it when nobody really showed her. Guess who really showed up and put you on the earth and pushed you in that stroller? She braided your hair, said it be long when you get older. I'ma simulate your roots, you can't simulate the truth.